You know what every shooter game has? A rocket launcher. You know what Remnant didn't have until now? A rocket launcher. Hey there hunters, welcome back to the Gunners Guild. Today we're going to be discussing and showcasing 2 more new weapons in the Remnant from Hell mod. Link to its Nexus page is in the description, and I do highly recommend giving it a shot if you have played Remnant before. It really mixes things up and keeps me coming back to test new setups. In the recent 1.04 release, we have gained a plethora of new weaponry in all categories. Today's showcase will be on the Waster's Boomcannon, a rocket launcher, and the Chicago CHUNKwriter, a tweaked form of the Chicago typewriter, but trust me, it's an entirely different beast. But let's start with the rockets though. So the Waster's Boomcannon is a new rocket launcher, which ironically was actually in the game already, it was just never completed nor released. So the modders put in the effort and made the weapon functional, and man, yeah, it's a blast. One of the tricky things about adding weapons to shooter games especially is that it's hard to make them feel unique because, they're all just point and shoot. But how could the game survive without a rocket launcher before? This thing's amazing, plus it does something no other weapon does. It's unique in that it's a single round weapon that fires an explosive, meaning it's the first and only weapon that can make use of Slayer's armor, as well as the Vulcan's detonator and cryogen blast. Plus, if we pair this with Hive Cannon, not only are both our weapons explosive, but we can also cover our corrosion with Hive Cannon, our frost with either the cryogen or the ice spear, and get bleed with claws and fire with Vulcans, or flip those around, whatever you want. And of course, we still have excellent AoE and single target damage. There's very few downsides to running the Waster's Boomcannon outside the fact that it's really easy to kill yourself from friendly fire damage. Exceedingly easy. You're gonna do it a lot, especially if you play on the higher difficulties. So let's just go ahead and talk about the setups I made for the Boomcannon. One is going to be using the cryogen blast and the other is using Vulcan's detonator. Both are pretty much going to play identical because it's the same weapon, but there are some differences. As I mentioned before, we're going to be using the Slayer armor since we finally have another weapon that can work with it that doesn't require me to use a sniper. Since the Boomcannon is a single shot weapon, we are effectively getting a 30% damage bonus on every single shot besides the first. And since the Boomcannon does booms, it's explosive, so either we're going to be using Vulcan Detonator or Cryogen Blast amulets for it. Both work great. Vulcan's gives us that 25% base flat damage as well as the added fire dots, and the Cryogen Blast gives us hypothermia and freeze. I find Vulcan's better for bossing, not just because of the extra damage, but we can also run Ice Spear on the rocket launcher and get an instant freeze on the bosses that way. For clearing zones, the Cryogen Blast is a safer option since you can tag elites and enemies around corners and slow them before they even start to engage you. Either way though, we're going to be pairing this thing with Hive Cannon, which I know seems like a weird choice since it doesn't benefit from the Slayer armor at all, but since it's also an explosive, we can scale it with our amulets like we would do with our Boomcannon. Plus, if we were to use the Hunter Pistol, then we would need to get Corrosive Aura to get in our Corrosion, which is pretty much mandatory for most builds. And that mod is close range, and that's something we don't want to do when we're using the Boomcannon. So obviously we're going to be running the Hive Cannon. The rings do have a lot of flexibility. I simply went and grabbed Empowering Loop since we don't really care about our fire rate, and then I'm also going to be using the Outlaw Sigil since it will give us 30% reload speed, which is actually really good. We do desperately need that. Cool thing about this ring compared to the Grimcoil ring, which is another single shot focus ring, is that this persists through weapon swaps, so Hive Cannon won't interfere with this ring at all, like if you were to use Grimcoil. You can also run the Boomcannon in a mod powered build though, as it does generate huge amounts of mod power, enough to pretty much fill all your mods with one shot if you're using Burden of the Follower. It also works extremely well on dot and status based builds with Osseous armor and Ring of the Punisher. As it does have that free slot, we can use fire dots with Vulcans and any other mod, and it's an easy 2 statuses right there. It's actually a very versatile weapon, although I don't particularly recommend it for melee builds for obvious reasons. This weapon was a great addition to the game, and I happen to always pick the bosses that it works terribly on, like Tien here, but it still pulled through. But now let's take a step away from the rocket launcher here and dive back into familiar territories with the Cleveland CHUNKwriter, and this thing does chunk. At first you may notice that it looks and shoots like a Chicago typewriter, and you would be correct, and honestly I didn't think I'd like this weapon all that much since the main difference is that it shoots slower and hits harder, and has opposite recoil in that it gains accuracy as it shoots, so you need to commit to longer stretches of firing. But man, I was wrong. It is so much more than just that. It really needs to be taken for a ride before you actually understand this weapon. No surprise though, but what makes this weapon unique and amazing is the mod Overclock. This mod can store 75 charges and then reverses the function of the typewriter. It now has crazy recoil as it shoots, expanding out to obscenely inaccurate levels, but it does shoot much faster this time. And again, this mod does seem super simple on paper, but trust me, it's not. First is that the mod uses your weapon damage, which makes it function like a reserve mag of 75 rounds that you can just dump in a pinch if enemies are getting close and you don't want to reload, as the reload is notoriously slow, just like the Cleveland typewriter. But more than just that, because it uses your weapons damage, it's actually a mod that's not scaled by mod damage, and therefore it's out of that crazy limbo state of forced weapon mods. Again though, that's not all. Yes, it gets even more insane. This mod can also be used with other mod power generating items, such as one piece of cultist armor or lab armor, the Iskall ring or Burden of the Follower and Evoker seal to generate mod power passively or even actively, and therefore bullets. It's a weird interaction where you can actually convert mod power directly into bullets without needing to reload, and therefore you can sustain the mod portion of it and use that almost exclusively if you wanted to. Yeah, trust me, the potential with this weapon is insane. It just seems so basic at first glance, but it's anything but that. It opens up the possibility to so many builds and item combinations that weren't really beneficial before. That being said, I'm going to be focusing on the build I had prepared for, like it was an old reliable, which is Radiant Velocity Core. It's the same-ish setup as using other automatic weapons, but I did make a few changes to accommodate the CHUNKwriter. First is that we are using Hive Cannon here as well, instead of using Machine Pistol and Corrosive Aura. Reason being is that we really don't need to or want to be close, as we have Fat Roll with the Radiant armor. But also, we don't particularly want to use the Machine Pistol at all. Before, we would use Provisioner's Ring and swap between the typewriter and the Machine Pistol so we never really had to reload, but that's not necessary anymore. Instead, I'm going to be using the Celerity Stone, which is my favorite ring if you didn't know. This ring gives us increased fire rate, something we don't really need, but I'll take it anyway. But it also makes our item use speed faster, which is great since we're quite slow in this armor, and gives us more movement speed with adrenaline stuff. So with this, we can use adrenaline to move faster, Frenzy Dust to shoot even faster with Velocity Core, and of course ammo boxes to bypass the reload. So the general flow of the fight is to just stop, activate Velocity Core, dump our mag, swap to the mod, dump that, pop an ammo box, rinse and repeat. We do use Hive Cannon to pick off adds and apply corrosion, but otherwise it's just straight CHUNKwriter. It takes care of bosses and adds quite effectively, and it was actually a blast to play with. I know it's a relatively niche playstyle, and I do have other ideas for the build, which is the mod version of it, and while it's cool, I do still prefer this setup with Radiant and the Celerity Stone. The mod version of this though was using one piece of Labyrinth armor with the Velocity Core, Osseous armor, and Burden of the Follower and Evoker to focus on the mod power side of it. While still scaling the range damage with Osseous, the setup is kind of fun to use the mod only, but I just found it kind of lacking with some damage from missing the armor set bonuses. I'm not really sure if it's any better or worse. It definitely feels fine, I just don't know, it's just not really my cup of tea. Still though, there's plenty of options for the CHUNKwriter. But that's basically all for me. That was the showcase for today. I hope you all enjoyed it. Thank you all for watching. Good luck out there, hunters, and go pick up this Remnant mod because they're just keep adding more stuff. Anyway, peace.